This man attacked the woman. A minute later, he heard a roar behind him. Sometimes if there are two or more, they will push each other out of the way. Sometimes they'll show me their toys, and one of my favorite toys, tigers, thinks I'm a complete waste of oxygen. I don't know why. A happy tiger will face their ears towards you and walk along a fence line with you and make funny groan-like moves. Occasionally, an annoyed tiger will swivel its ears back, flatten them, show you their teeth, and make a low growl. It doesn't mean that in general scheme of themes, tigers and lions can be befriended. Exceptions with abundant caution on the part of human keepers and training from cub stage should not be mistaken as a bond of friendship. When a tiger trusts you, it most likely is friendly. Well, first of all, remember, and I bet you already know this, but whether a tiger shows these traits when you're around, it is not safe to approach, even though it could be friendly. Never take your chances. Victoria lived in a small town in the north of Serbia and has always prided herself on being a native. During her long and difficult life, the woman had a chance to see both good and bad. Her young man husband, John, passed away 7 years ago, leaving the inconsolable widow in a dilapidated house in constant need of repair and a bunch of baseball cards, which he's been collecting since childhood. John and Victoria lived together for about 4 years and rightfully enjoy the respect and love of the locals. All this time, Mrs. George worked as a language teacher at a local school. She had taught, without exaggeration, no less than a third of the town's population. In addition, if it were not for the insidious accident that took her husband's life, Mrs. George could have said that she had a happy family. Victoria and her husband had a young sister, Kate, who was married long ago and moved away with her business person husband to the other end of the country. At first, Kate insisted that Mrs. George moved in with her, but her husband's business went uphill and she gave up on this idea, distracted by the success and the newly acquired wealth. Sure, Victoria and Kate stayed in touch and even talked on the phone on big holidays. These conversations, however, were purely formal, lacking genuine interest and warmth. Knowing that her daughter had her own family now, Mrs. George made it a point not to ask for much of her attention and time. After the death of her husband, the woman got used to relying on herself for everything she needed and kept the house alone with her cat Lucy. Since her dilapidated house had constantly required care and attention, Mrs. Ayers did her best to keep it in good condition. Victoria turned to some of her friends only in rare cases when she couldn't do without the male strength, but otherwise she tried to deal with everything on her own. Most of the time, it was Jack White who came to visit Victoria. Jack was passionate about hunting. The man disapproved the poaching, and thus he always had the necessary license to shoot game that was permitted by law. Helping Victoria with the house renovations, the man flat out refused to take the money she offered him. At the time, Jack said repeatedly that it is his way of saying thanks for the wonderful school years he had with Victoria as his teacher. Therefore, when Victoria decided to repair her fence, the old woman did not hesitate to turn to Jack, who she treated like her own friend because she could still remember him as the little first grader she taught. Much to Victoria's surprise, this time the man came over with more than just his construction tools. With a mysterious smile, Jack took off his backpack, and a second or two later, someone's fluffy little head popped out of it. "And who do we have here hiding here? What a wonderful little thing Jack did to bring me a puppy," Victoria asked admiringly. Jack hesitated and blushed deeply in response. The fact was that Jack remembered the woman's request and how he promised to find her a good puppy. And the other day, as he was walking by the edge of the forest, the man found a little white tiger cub in the bushes. He was making loud squeaking noises from hunger and cold, and Jack did not know where the cub's mother and brothers had gone. But judging by the footprints of a bear she saw nearby, Jack assumed that they could have become victims of a larger predator. The young hunter's heart could not allow him to leave the little cub to a certain death in the forest, and so he decided to save the tiger. However, Jack already had 2 dogs at his home, and he realized that his watchdogs were unlikely to get used to the small forest predator. The man was thinking about what he could do in this situation when suddenly he remembered Victoria, who had long asked him to find her a cub. "You know what? I'll bring her this little thing. The woman will be happy while he's growing up, and then he'll hear the call of the wild. Sooner or later, and will run off into the forest and I'll find her an actual little feline in the meantime," reasoned Jack. Victoria didn't even realize that it was a real tiger in front of her, since she had never seen the forest predators in person. Needless to say, "I'm very pleased." "So very pleased," said the old woman, picking up the little cat cub. Blinded by the bright sun, the cub sneezed twice and then licked his lips and looked into Victoria's eyes. "Oh, you're probably hungry now. I'll be quick." The old woman fussed around the little cub, bringing him into the house. The fluffy cat named Lucy, who was sitting on the windowsill, saw the forest orphan and immediately began to hiss loudly, his hair standing on end. "Lucy, can't you see that he's hungry and scared?" The woman reasoned with the cat. In addition, taking his bowl, poured a little canned meat into it. Outraged by such impotence, the offended Lucy turned away and watched Jack on the fence through the window, showing his disapproval as best he could. Meanwhile, the cub, quickly and with great appetite, finished off his portion of the canned food and stared inquiringly at Victoria. "Well, aren't you a little glutton?" The old woman laughed and quickly fulfilled the cub's silent request. When the cub was finally full and his sides got noticeably rounded, he looked like he was about to fall asleep. Victoria smiled knowingly and laid a soft bedding for the animal in the cardboard box. The tiger cub meticulously sniffed the bed and, having satisfied his interest, fell asleep with a smile on her face. Victoria closed the curtains in the room so that the bright sun would not interfere with the cub's sleep, and then went outside, intending to help Jack repair the fence. Casting an inquisitive glance at the old woman, Jack realized that she took the white tiger cub for a puppy. "Okay, I'll let him stay here for a little while and get stronger, and then I will see what to do about it," thought Jack, getting more and more convinced that it was a good idea to bring the cub to Victoria that day. The man worked almost until nightfall, and when the fence was looking like new, he examined his work with satisfaction. "Thank you, Jack. I don't know what I'd do without you. You have golden hands, and you're a good man," Jack said admiringly, looking at the former student with maternal care and love. As the old man was about to leave, Victoria handed him a bag of sweets she had prepared for his two children, and then went back to the house, where the little cub had already woken up and made a real mess. Victoria named him Teddy in honor of the teddy bear from the cartoon, and partially to match the impressive appetite of the little forest orphan, who was growing rapidly by as time went by and the old woman began to notice that having grown up significantly, Teddy looked nothing like a regular yard dog. Mrs. George has repeatedly witnessed how the neighbors' dogs are afraid of Teddy and try to avoid him. Any final doubts were dispelled by one of the local hunters, who saw the wolf sitting on the lawn of the old woman's house and instinctively reached for his gun. "Hey, what's the matter? Mister, what's your issue with my big cat, Teddy?" Victoria asked indignantly. By a thankful coincidence, she was watering the flowers in the garden at the time. "What kind of cat do you think this is? It's a real white tiger." "Take my word for it. I've seen many of these predators in my lifetime," the hunter replied. At first, Victoria was shocked by the news, but then she pulled herself together and thought about all the sweet moments she shared with Teddy during his time at her home, which calmed her down. The old woman knew that the young tiger never showed any aggression towards her or anyone near her. "Well, okay, so Teddy is a tiger. He may be a forced predator by blood, but a kind and loving heart is beating in his chest. He can live with me as long as he needs," the woman reasoned. A year passed, and during this time, the same tiger guarded Victoria's yard better than any dog or other cat ever could. The only two things that made Teddy different from his domesticated brother were that he didn't know how to bark and wag his tail.